Good evening. Uh, I'm delighted that JNU is having this conference, and sorry I couldn't attend in person. So I thought I'll give you my talk by phone, by this Skype or recording device. My topic, the topic of my talk is assimilation of tradition and modernity as it pertains to Indian civilization, Indian literature, Indian heritage. I guess when they came up with this topic, the idea was to discuss how tradition is being assimilated into modernity, or maybe modernity being assimilated into tradition, or both these being assimilated into something higher and futuristic. But I want to take a step back and discuss the terms. The term tradition, modernity, postmodernity, these terms and this whole framework is a European one. And it's based on European history and their worldview. So, according to this framework, these three are chronological things that happen in history and reflect stages of humanity, the stages of human consciousness and evolution. So, societies go from tradition to modernity to postmodernity. And also, the West is ahead of others and pulls others along. But this is sort of a Western universal idea of how societies evolve. And in this framework, these three are mutually exclusive. You are in some society is called traditional, some is modern, some is postmodern. Or if not the whole country, then in a particular group, a particular community is a traditional one, another one is modern, and something is postmodern. Or a particular discipline, particular school of thought is in one of these three. And historically, these stages of society's evolution have been in conflict. So tradition wanted to fight for tradition, and modernity had to fight against tradition. So for instance, science had to fight Christianity because Christianity wasn't accommodating and wasn't tolerating science. And this went on for a while. And then there was this stalemate that there is this domain of tradition, Christianity, and this other domain of science. So these tensions are being negotiated constantly, and they are tensions. So that's the Western framework in which these terms exist. They are not parallel but sequential, and mutually exclusive and in conflict. Now, in India, time is not chronological and linked to from going from bad to good. Things can also go from being very advanced to dropping back. So, time is not linear, one directional from less developed to more developed. That's not the nature of Indian time. It's been called polymorphic, which means there are many flows going on in parallel, many flows going on even backward, forward, and so on. Complex. It's a complex. Time is more complex than one flow, and so you cannot fit everybody in one structure, one framework of time. And a society. Now, this is the most important thing in Indian concept. Society can have the components of tradition, modernity, and postmodernity all at once. There's no contradiction in that. I can be very traditional, I can be very modern, and I can be very postmodern all at once, all in the same day, all in the same meal, or in the same piece of work I'm doing. There is absolutely nothing. I don't have to pigeonhole myself and say, well, I'm traditional or I'm modern or something like that. This this is an important breakthrough in our thinking if we can defy and refute the very structures implied in tradition, modern, postmodern way of thinking. We are often asked, "Are you traditional? Are you modern?" And we've accepted that. That's a colonized kind of a thing. I don't have to choose. What do you mean I'm traditional? My tradition has modernity in it and postmodernity in it. So this is something people should appreciate. Now, if you look at the Western history of modernity, a very large part of the inputs came from outside the West. China, India, Middle East, and the various colonies and places conquered in Africa, Latin America, the Americas, brought inputs in so many kinds of fields that led to the assembly and coalescing all these ideas into what became known as modernity. So modernity, while they claim is a Western kind of a thing, it is actually not, because a large part of the ideas came from elsewhere. And similar, and there are books on this. There are books. If you contact me, I can tell you some of the books on Indian contributions, Chinese contributions to European science, European technology, and so on. Then there is even more input when the West goes from modernity to postmodernity. In the last 100 or so years, Western modernity reached kind of a roadblock, a dead end. A lot of crises going on with a very deterministic idea in science, very deterministic philosophy, linguistics, everything sort of determined, within the confines of modernity, figured out, finally resolved. That kind of modernity came crashing down. It came crashing down in art, linguistics. Ferdinand Saussure, French linguist, was actually a Sanskrit scholar in Paris. And he did his doctorate in conjugate verbs in Sanskrit, something in Panini, something like that. And his class notes on the philosophy of language in Panini, philosophy of language Panini, got published after his death posthumously by his students, without acknowledging that this was actually Sanskrit grammar he was teaching, and they gave it the name structuralism. That became the Bible, the beginnings of the Western idea of structuralism, and this was one of the major, one of the major milestones in the evolution of post-structuralism, which then became postmodernism. So not only this kind of input from linguistics, but art, a lot of postmodern art, that kind of had influence from India, and this is also quite well documented. A lot of postmodernism owes itself to Vedanta. Books have been written on postmodernism and Vedanta and Buddhism, Madhyamika Buddhism in particular. So you can deconstruct the Western idea of tradition, modernity, and postmodernity, question and challenge to what extent it's really Western and to what extent there are inputs from other places. So this framework is, we don't have to be stuck to this framework as though it's some sacrosanct framework that we've been given and we have to fit into that. In fact, we can challenge it. Now, I've been involved in a project, and I need to publish more of that, where I'm documenting the Indian contributions to Western modernity and Western postmodernity. That's a kind of a rewriting of history, because the history of India is not only within Indian geographical boundaries, but also contributions to the rest of the world, including the Western modernity and postmodernity contributions by India. Now, where things stand today is that this digestion of Indian ideas into modernity, which happened, for a few centuries, and then in the last 100 years, the digestion of Indian ideas into postmodernity in the West, which has been going on, this is now accelerating. Now we have an integration of Indian tradition or Indian thought, Indian worldviews, into a new futuristic Western reformulation. This is going on very rapidly. The underlying frameworks are compatible with certain Western principles, and the pioneers they want to install are Western people, Western institutions. The language and the authority they want to install is also theirs. But a huge amount of ideas from India are being assimilated into this. What I'm trying to encourage is the opposite, which means there's so much wonderful stuff the West has done, so much wonderful stuff it is still doing, that is amazing, that is creative, that's innovative, and we should utilize it. But we can bring that in and assimilate that into our own tradition, our own framework, revise our own framework. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, sitting right with you is Professor Girish Jha at JNU, and his collaborator in the US is Balram Singh, both are dear friends of mine for a long time. What they're doing is an example of what I'm talking about. They're using cutting edge Western machinery, laboratory work, scientific experimentation to find out certain things that come from Ayurveda. So they're looking at how, for instance, ghee does its job of spreading throughout the body, going through the various vessels and so on. Is it nanoparticles going on, and things of that sort. So they're looking at bhasma to see if certain medicines where they're using, even things like gold and silver, which are supposed to be very deadly for you, but are these concoctions such that they go down to the nanoparticles and they're no longer dangerous in that form? Is that what Ayurveda is trying to achieve? And they're using modern scientific, biochemistry and chemistry and so on to establish some of these principles and expand our knowledge. So by doing that, they're actually taking modern Western science and technology and building up, enhancing Ayurvedic science. So when our tradition and modern West come together, it does not have to be on their terms. It does not have to be that we get assimilated into their way of thinking. It could also be the other way around. It could also be that our people who are very confident and strong and competent in both, you have to be good in both sides. You have to know your tradition and you have to understand what the West has to offer in order to bring that into our traditional framework. And I just gave you an example of what they are doing in Ayurveda. There are many other examples. For instance, Manjul Bhargav, great mathematician, has discovered certain mathematical series and certain kinds of things which the West claims to have discovered in number theory actually came out of some mathematics in India. And then he further discusses, I've had many conversations on this, and he says that these Indian ideas were not separable from Indian metaphysics. So you have Indian metaphysics from which certain mathematics comes, and then you have a few hundred years ago Westerners who've either taken it from there or coincidentally they've developed something very similar. So now this Western stuff has enhanced for a few hundred years. We should take all those enhancements and put them back. We should take all the modern mathematics that has come out of these things and put them back into the framework, because our framework is very nicely integrated with our metaphysics. So this will enhance our tradition with the help of modernity and postmodernity. So we can actually reverse the flow, which is what I'm talking about. Now, a good analogy is that when Hong Kong was an island the British leased for 99 years or something from China. It is not something they conquered and all that. They had a lease agreement. So when this lease was running out, China wanted it back and got it back. Britain tried to argue that we've developed so much, we built all these high-rise buildings, we can't take them away. We've got a $1 trillion economy, banking is the hub of banking and trade and all that, and we are the ones who developed what used to be a bunch of swamp land, and we developed it and made it so modern. And so how can we just give all that away? We can't remove the buildings and take them with us. So they gave that argument. And China said, nothing doing. We're getting it back, including all the buildings, including all the improvements, all that you've done, all the enhancements you've made to our property, we're getting it back. And they did. Now, this is also the law of how real estate works. If I own a plot of land and I lease it to you for 99 years or whatever, you take it, you build some nice buildings, you clean up all the mess. When the lease is expired, all of that also comes back to me. So we should do this with tradition. Our tradition has been taken by others and utilized, and they've added many things to it. They've enhanced the tradition. They've added how you market it. They validated some of the stuff, scientifically. They've enhanced its credibility. They made new discoveries, made new applications, and of course they have called all that their own and disconnected it from tradition. So they disconnected the traditional roots, Indian traditional roots of lots of Western modernity and postmodernity. We have to reconnect that and claim all those enhancements back, just like the Chinese claimed all the enhancements made to Hong Kong back. So we would get Ayurveda modernized, postmodernized. We would get mathematics, our mathematics back, and so on for so many disciplines. This principle of assimilating modernity and postmodernity back into our own tradition is a very powerful tradition, a powerful principle if you were to carry it out. So that's my message. I thank you for listening. I'm hoping that when this is played, it's at a time when I'm able to pick up the phone, call you, and answer some questions, because I always love these events at JNU. JNU has been a wonderful place. I have a lot of friends and happy memories of several events there, and I look forward to further interaction. Thank you very much.